Although I hope to come to you soon, I am writing to you with these instructions, so that if I am delayed, you will know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and foundation of the truth. Beyond all question, the mystery from which true godliness springs is great. He appeared in the flesh, was vindicated by the Spirit, was seen by angels, was preached among the nations, was believed on in the world, and was taken up in glory. This is the word of the Lord.
I mentioned at the Grenfell anniversary a couple of weeks ago that the rebuilding of St Helens after World War II was a symbol of hope at the heart of our community, that after a tragedy there can be a new start made. There's something about that rebuild that embodies the Christian hope, the Christian message of a Jesus, a Saviour who was killed, who was crucified for our salvation, and God raised from the dead. And there's something embodied in that kind of phoenix from the flames is the other analogy that's commonly used, that actually God has done something, and the building is testimony to it. And actually there are numerous details in a building like this, in any church building, that are sort of derived from the Christian story. They're trying to embody something of it, something of the message. For example, using kind of the kind of materials that will last, to speak of God's permanence, God's dependability, that we can always go to him. I guess one of the really obvious things are the arches, which are a beautiful feature of this building. Sort of pretty much any direction you look in, you see arches. And the idea of them, of course, is to draw your eye upwards and your thoughts upwards. Metaphorically, symbolically, to draw your thoughts to God, beyond us, above us, the one who gives us our lives, who gives us everything, who is the one who we can look to. So anniversaries, they're good to remember, they're good to sort of reimagine, re-envision. And so we're looking at a little short section of the Bible today that uses the imagery of a building to do that reimagining, that re-envisioning. And I think there are two surprises in what we had read to us. The first surprise is that church is not building. Church is people, not building. Did you notice that in what we read? I think it'll come up underneath me on the screen. This group meeting in Ephesus a long time ago, ordinary people, they are the church of the living God. They are, like we are this morning, a group of people meeting together that you belong to more than a building that you go to. And that kind of makes sense. A living community to represent the living God, God's household, his family, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, all drawn together because God draws people to himself. So in the years that St Helens didn't have a building and met after the war on Oxford Gardens in the old school there, I guess like many churches are meeting around the world today in schools and community halls, it was still a church. The church still existed even though it didn't have a home, because the church is people, not buildings. So that's the first surprise, or for some, a reminder. Oh yeah, it does say that. But the church is like a building, and that's the reading we had. Going back to what we read, the people are told that they're like a pillar and a foundation. What do pillars and foundations do? They support things, they hold them up, they make them visible, like these pillars are doing with the wonderful arches and the windows and the roof above. And in that sort of a way, the church is supposed to hold up and make visible something. Well, what is it that it's supposed to do that with? Do you see it there? 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 15. Each church in each community is a pillar and foundation of the truth in that community, the gospel truth. And I think that's the second big surprise here. that the church is a news agency like Reuters, not a charity like Oxfam. Now, don't get me wrong, the church will go about founding charities like Oxfam, along with other people who want to help those in need, which indeed is how Oxfam came into being. But it does that alongside the church. The church itself is a news agency. It's a pillar holding up, holding out the truth, a message, a true story, which is wonderful news. So, if you are regular in church, or if you're just here every once in a while, you will have noticed there is someone we talk about quite a lot. There is a story we tell and retell and sing about and preach about. A story rooted in the story of everything, a story that connects to you and me and the world around us and gives meaning and context to your life and mine and that of the world. When we read in the Gospels, Jesus says, "I am the truth." The truth, you see, that the church holds up is all about a person. And it's in this person, Jesus, that we see God's truth in all its fullness. And as we read Matthew, Mark, or Luke, or John, one of those Gospels, we meet someone who is full of wisdom, who has courage and conviction, and yet who is wonderfully approachable, who brings hope and healing to those he engages with. Someone who combines both truth and love in the most compelling and attractive way. And of course, there's so much we don't know and can't know about Jesus, about God. Paul the writer here, straight away after talking about truth in verse 15, in verse 16, he describes Christianity as a mystery. And then he quotes from a poem or a hymn to express something of that mystery. But if we look at the words of the poem and the hymn, it's not a total mystery. It is mysterious. We don't know everything, and yet we can, 2,000 years ago, just as today, compose hymns and songs and worship to describe what we do know. He appeared in the flesh, was vindicated by the Spirit, was seen by angels, preached among the nations, believed on in the world, taken up in glory, they sang or said. And so this church, like other living churches in this neighborhood, is a pillar in the community, holding up, holding out this message, this true story of God's love in Jesus Christ, and inviting everyone to come and tune into it, come and discover it with us. That's the invitation, that's the hope, that's the passion behind this, is we hold up, we hold out, and we say, come and discover this with us. This is wonderful. Now, I'm assuming that most of us want to know the truth about life, about the world. Don't you want to know the truth? About this world we live in, about what it is to be human in this world, about the bigger story of what God's doing, how to make the most of this precious gift which is life. Jesus said, those who listen to him, he said, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And that's what we discover. If we keep this story of Jesus at the center of life, in the center of everything, we discover a freedom. We also discover a unity, a family. We've talked about it a couple of times. We discover a purpose. We discover a cohesion. See, if truth is talked about in a sort of fairly loose way nowadays. If truth is just subjective, well, it's your truth versus my truth, isn't it? Your culture, your tribe versus me and mine and my perspective. And we end up in a world full of conflicts if we haven't got truth underpinning things. Especially just in a neighbourly conversation, we kind of we end up avoiding stuff that really matters because we know we don't agree on it. Similarly, if truth is sort of personal taste, and I think that's how some people think about truth, if I believe that blue is the best colour and that salted caramel is the best ice cream, you can pat me on the head and just say, well, Steve, that's your personal opinion, all the while knowing that green is the best colour because, well, there are so many different shades, and therefore pistachio is the best ice cream. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about truth with a capital T. Truth which is wonderful and underpins things, but also calls us to engage with what God has done at the heart of human history so that we can know him. As Jesus, his own son, as the verse said, as he took on flesh, as he became one of us so we can know God, and then as he died for us to bring the world back to God and paid for us, and then rose from the dead, that this thing that God has done at the heart of human history, this story which we want to broadcast, is one of a living God, a living Saviour, who calls us to know him in everyday life. It changes everything. It's a rock to build life on and eternity on, and it's wonderful news. Well, that's God's vision for our church and every church, and the application is really obvious, isn't it? I want to encourage all of us to be part of his story, this big story of what God's doing in the world and in our lives if we'll receive it. And of course there are things we can do individually. There are things we can watch and listen to and read and think about. But actually God's calling us together. He's calling us to family. He's calling us to discover things together. And so the invitation, I guess, is if you've started to explore this and think, I'd love to talk with someone about it, I'm happy to. Other people in church are happy to meet you for a coffee over the summer and to talk more about what do you think, what are your questions, what are your doubts, what are your objections, what else have you read? How do we get into this truth together, this story of this extraordinary person, Jesus, together? Or just come one Sunday here or any Bible-based church, and you will find in the hymns, in the prayers, in the sermon, the opportunity to engage some more with the story of this person, Jesus, and to reflect for yourself on this claim that this is the true story of life and so of our lives. And to get to know this Jesus who brings truth and hope and freedom into our lives.